in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Scott McGregor. He is the Director of People and Communities at Cisco. Scott, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to share a little bit for our listeners about yourself, including your pronouns and when you were younger? Do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Wow, thank you. So again, Scott McGregor, I am in our People and Communities organization here at Cisco. I also get to run our historically Black college and university program, where we've donated a ton of money to support those schools over the next 5 years in areas of like cybersecurity, talent development, and things along that line. Been at Cisco for 14 years, been in the corporate world quite a while, and this is by far the best job I've ever had because I get to impact people directly. Um, in terms of when I wanted to grow up, I actually wanted to be a lawyer. But then I understood you need to do a lot of writing and a lot of reading. And I was had some trouble with reading and writing kind of growing up as a youngster. So I really didn't know what I was going to end up being. But here I am many years later doing some great work for a great company for a great cause. So I guess it all worked out.
Absolutely. It all worked out. And I love to hear that it's the best job that you have ever had as well. That is very high praise. Not everyone can say that for their current job as well or for their current company, being there for over 10 years. I believe you said 14 as well. When you think about just company culture and your role on the leadership team too, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you really measure kind of what's happening and this dynamic thing of company culture, knowing that it's going to change once new people join and people move around the organization too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I like about, Cisco's our purpose statement is powering an inclusive future for all. So when I think about for all, then that means, okay, well, where does Scott fit in? And how can Scott use his skills, his talents, his passion, his energy to do cool things that drive outcomes for the company, but also help me feel like I'm really making a difference. So I think from a culture perspective, I measure, how many times a day even can I say, boy, this is pretty cool? Or how many times can I say, oh boy, I really enjoyed doing that, or I really, believe this was the right thing to do. Even when it doesn't quite work out the way I want, I know we're moving toward, this particular goal. So I think I measure it that way. It's very unscientific, of course. But the more I can say that to myself, and I can say today was a good day, even if there were problems, then I feel like I'm in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time, like that. So those are kind of the qualitative measurements I would use. And I think quantitatively, it's like how many people am I able to impact through the work that I'm doing? And that is easily measurable. I'm looking at the almost 300,000 students that are members of historically Black colleges and universities, and we are directly impacting those people and the institutions that they attend. So, yeah.
I think that's a great answer because it also includes kind of the questions to ask yourself, no matter where you are in the organization as well. Hold yourself accountable and kind of celebrate the work that you're doing too. When you have kind of this work that is really purpose driven in an environment where you feel like there's innovation, you feel like your work really has meaning, that attracts a lot of people to the company as well to apply and be part of the team. I would love to know kind of what's unique about Cisco, and we know kind of the uniqueness of an organization really attracts folks as well. So, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, for Cisco to be a large company, it still allows you the opportunity to be entrepreneurial. So you can come in and you can kind of look around for things to do, and you can grow that into a role for yourself. So what's unique about, I guess, my journey here, I came in the sales organization. I spent 5 years in sales, but it was always kind of adjacent to diversity and inclusion and talent and that sort of thing. and just start picking up assignments that my leader said, Scott, can you go take a look at this? Or, hey, Scott, we'd love for you to take a look at this work. And I haven't applied for a role since 2013. So every job, every opportunity I've gotten has been because it was something I was interested in, but also it was something that was important to my leaders to take a look at and work on. So I think that's unique. I don't think many Fortune 100 technology companies can offer you the opportunity to drive your own ship, as it will, but still be able to solve problems for your company. So I think that's kind of unique.
Now, having the opportunity to kind of go into different roles at the organization, really be supported by leaders and managers, mentors, sponsors as well, and feel like you have that kind of startup mentality within a large organization too is really cool as well, and definitely something that is unique. I think along those same lines too, to have access to the opportunities and also as yourself as a leader to open up opportunities for folks as well. How have you kind of thought about, reflected, and kind of seen the role of those people managers and leaders change since the pandemic started in 2020?
I think the good leaders have definitely tried to get more proximate to their teams. So Cisco has some tools that allow us to be able to hear directly from the employees on a regular basis. But there's often times where that lived experience doesn't line up with what's being reported in those tools. So I think the good managers still will reach out and say, hey, I noticed you said this, want to kind of dig in a little bit and understand a little bit more. And because of that difference sometimes between what you record and what you actually are living, Cisco as a company decided to really lean into that space for its African American and Black employees, which is why we came up with our 2020 social justice actions around improving the lived experience for those folks. So I think our CEO was looking in that direction even before the pandemic. But so it was very timely that as we all went to hybrid work, we all start working from home. No one was able to kind of see each other. In some cases for 2 years, we already kind of laid that track for that type of engagement. And it seems to have worked out well.
Yeah, I think kind of modeling really key behavior from your CEO, from managers, really keeping kind of a pulse what's happening with the team, asking open-ended questions and listening for the answers, how you're demonstrating that you're listening is really critical too. And people can tell when you're being authentic, when you're not, when those resources available for managers from the company too. I think, over the past few years as well, we've really thought about those meaningful moments of connection. How are we connected to the lived experiences of, your team members as well? How are you thinking about setting up a work environment to naturally and organically, but also cultivate that connection and relationship building?
Sure. Well, we have rituals in my own team meetings where we always kind of start off with how you doing, how's the weekend, and we go around to each person and let them share what was going on. There's no script, maybe they had a great weekend, maybe the weekend wasn't that great, but at least it kind of gives them space to kind of speak to how they're feeling and how they're doing. And if I pick up on anything, I think I need to maybe look at in a one-on-one, then I'll do that. But we start with that. And then it also gives everyone else a chance to hear what everyone else is doing. So that's something we had really leaned into intentionally during the pandemic. And even now, as we're back more doing regular, kind of meeting in person and business travel, I still keep that as part of our team meeting.
I think thinking about those rituals and kind of behaviors that you integrate into those the meetings are important, how you connect with folks, and what needs to be followed up on as well if somebody doesn't feel comfortable talking about it in a group or they do too. You mentioned kind of improving the lived experiences of folks as well. I would love to talk about kind of a specific initiative. Can you tell me a little bit more about Social Justice Action 8, what the kind of key goals are and the mission?
Sure, certainly. So, historically, Black colleges and universities are just a personal have personal connection for me. I attended North Carolina Central University, and they're schools that have always performed an outsized service to the resources they get, and sometimes even the reputation that they have in terms of education and delivering education. So we decided to invest a lot of money in supporting folks to continue their education at HBCUs, but also to help lift their cybersecurity profile. So going in and doing assessments on their network, making sure the networks are up to a certain standard, and then donating software to help those folks, those schools that need it. We also work with our networking academy. So that's a program that allows students to get training in networking or cybersecurity or software development. And we also, are looking to stand up these learning circles so that students that are going through those programs are able to kind of get support from Cisco employees to help them as they navigate that space. So that's the program. I have the pleasure of working with a great team that runs that on a day-to-day basis.
It sounds like there's a lot of holistic support. I think learning circles are a great way to kind of communicate and create that community with folks who are also going through similar experiences, ask questions, and really have that connection too, in terms of opening up opportunity and accessibility and making sure that employers are doing whatever they can to make sure that they're opening up kind of these job opportunities and also professional development. What can they really do to intentionally support first generation team members at their individual companies? What have you seen work really well, or what's your perspective there?
No, thank you. So I think mentorship and sometimes not even official mentorship, just a buddy system. So if people joined an organization and they're people of color, or if they're, specific genders or whatnot, and they want to see people that reflect their background, pair them up with an individual who's already had, some success at that corporation, so they can answer this basic question sometimes about that. People look around organizations that don't see people who reflect their lived experience or their background, they can feel alienated. So, the easiest thing, I think, is to kind of have that buddy system, that mentor system that you would support. I also think executives can, from their vantage point, can also embrace new employees and give them a sense of what's important to them at a particular level. Because oftentimes when you're, new or entry level in a role, you don't always see how that role benefits the company at a higher level. So I would encourage executives to either sponsor or mentor those folks that are entry level or even interns that are just starting with the company. So those are two things that we do to great effect, I think, at Cisco. And then also we have our ERGs, or our employee resource groups, that folks can also join, and we make sure that all new employees know where those programs are so they can also engage.
Yeah, and sometimes I know I worked at a company, those two things overlap as well in terms of a formal mentorship program kind of being established through an employee resource group, or you meet your future mentor sponsor informally as well, and really develop that relationship. As a former ERG leader, I think employee resource groups are incredibly important to the company culture, but want to ask you directly kind of what role you see them playing, but also what role they are not playing as well in terms of company culture.
I think ERGs can be interesting. So if they are employee driven and employee led, they can kind of take on an advocacy sort of role, so you're looking to make sure that folks get things like promotion velocity, proximity to management, representation in terms of seeing folks in leadership roles. I think if they are company driven, they can kind of do some of the same things, but maybe not as much as be advocates, as more as create a kind of a safe space for people to, be around people that look like them and sound like them. I don't know if there's anything wrong with either approach, but I will say that the latter may make it more difficult sometimes for them to take on that advocacy role. You may be a little nervous, for example, talking about hot button issues. So if it's a Black ERG, you may not want to talk about police brutality, or if it's an LGBTQ group, you may not want to talk about, the disproportionate attacks on trans women. You may feel uncomfortable having those discussions if it's a corporate led as if rather than if it's an employee-led organization. So I think I think both directions can provide a value for folks, but one might just be a little bit more of have a revolutionary kind of advocacy push than the other.
Yeah, and I think that also requires some reflection questions too, in terms of individuals and group of why are we here? What are we a part of? Do we feel supported? Do we feel like this is a space where, we have psychological safety? Do we have the resources as well, the time and support from executives too for ERGs as well? I think we've talked a little bit about this too in terms of creating this inclusive culture where we're not looking to check a box and say, okay, we don't need to work on this in 2024 and 2025. It's something that you consistently need to think about. What is really important to ensure that all employees, whether it's day one or year five, feel like they are really part of this one Cisco culture?
Um, One, I think you should have leaders that are intentional about being as transparent as possible. Don't be afraid to talk about tough topics. If you think that there's downturns in the economy, if you think there's issues with supply chain, other things, or even more personal things like the COVID crisis, for example, or things that affect people's particular communities. Just be open to have those conversations with folks and let folks feel like I can talk about that and it's not going to make me feel any sort of way other than we're here to listen. We're not here to judge. We're not here to kind of make political statements, but just to let people be people. So I think those are things that you can do to make sure folks feel like they're being centered and being heard.
Yeah, lead with empathy, vulnerability, and open ear as well. And really, again, demonstrating that you're actively listening, not always responding and acting, but really creating that space too. I think one of the other changes we've seen over the past few years out of necessity is really the innovation, creativity, throwing out the kind of phrase, this is how it's always been, business as usual, because we really had to think out of the box in terms of the workplace and really what works for folks, meeting people where they are. Now, consistently auditing the employee experience is really critical. Can you tell me about how you and the team have really designed a system to be more equitable over the past 2 years, whether it's a process, policy, or initiative?
Um, if I understand right, I think what you're asking is kind of how are we making sure that people are being heard or the system is being equal across all teams? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I think because we started off with our tool to allow all managers to be able to hear directly from their individuals, but then also those skip level managers can also hear directly from those folks. So, and sometimes what you'll say to your manager, you may not say to your skip level leader or vice versa. But by having both lenses, I think it is given the employees, freedom to say, look, if there's something going on and there's something that I need to talk about, there's someone who's going to be here to listen. And so I think it's been pretty organic too. I mean, I don't know if it's something that we were as intentional about as it's just something we just discovered made sense for our employees.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense and kind of speaks to the question as well. I know that I was asking really specific questions about your journey to this work and kind of things you've seen work really well at Cisco, sharing best practices with our listeners. Is there anything that I didn't specifically ask that you want to share or, underscoring any key takeaways about the many things we have discussed here today? I want to pass the mic back to you, Scott.
Oh, sure. No, thank you. I mean, I've been in corporate America a long time. And Cisco has offered me an opportunity to really have an impact on my own community, but also to be able to drive initiatives that support our powering an inclusive future for all. So when I started off, I said it's the best job I've ever had. It's because, again, I get to, do cool stuff. I get to do stuff that's measurable that I can kind of look and see us moving the needle in a very substantive way, and be part of this whole notion that, corporations are probably, one of the tools that you need if you're going to drive like lasting social change. So, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I love my job and I love the fact that Cisco gives me an opportunity to do it.
I definitely agree with you that it is a key tool in society to drive social change. And also there's that responsibility too that, you're impacting so many folks' lives, whether you are an employer, customer, client, or you just, you interact with the employer brand on a day-to-day basis. Scott, really appreciate you taking the time to be on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at All Voices, we really believe in both employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.